Welcome, Flyers nitty-gritty fans. Yariv and Vasili back for a post-2025 NHL entry draft video. And we are excited to announce that the Philadelphia Flyers have selected 6th overall pick, Porter Martone. If you watched the live stream, you saw our shock and awe. I'm sure most people are a little bit in shock and awe, but not at the projectable frame of the player, at his upside. I think everybody is elated. It was just more the Flyers drafted a winger. Celia and I are going to go through all the details and everything we kind of know about it. Our initial thoughts are exceptional pick. We are very satisfied with it. And if center is now kind of somewhat solved with Trevor Zegras coming in here, and we'll talk about the other center that's also new to come in the second video. But Vasily, I'll let you open it up with your thoughts on Porter Martone, and I'll respond from there. But I think we can all say, at least the Flyers community seems to be very satisfied with this pick, which is kind of rare outside of the Matvei Michkov draft.
Yeah, the Brady Martin selection by Nashville really set the Flyers up to either select Porter Martone or James Hagens, and they opted to go with Porter Martone. Martone, obviously a big right winger, 6'3", 208 pounds, who played for the Brampton Steelheads in the OHL. And I will say, for what the Flyers did here, they did go with the best player available. That seemed to be their approach. Their scouts seemed to think that Porter Martone was the best player available and thus selected him over James Hagen. So I like the strategy in terms of what they did, right? They didn't go for need. And that's obvious, right? Because their need is technically at center before this draft. That was a big, area of concern for them. And the fact that they did go ahead and select a right winger in Martone, at least signals to me that their scouts thought he was the best player at that pick for the selection. So for me, it seems like the scouts did their homework here and Briere kind of let them do their thing. And I like the pick. And one other thing with Martone, he was consistently mocked, right, within the top 5 of this draft throughout this whole past year. So he's been considered to be a top 5 type of pick in this draft, even though the Flyers get him at 6.
Yeah, no, really well said. And the confidence was definitely there in this pick. I think even if you go back like 6 months or so, he was probably a top 3 pick in everybody's mind. I'm sure even at times top 2, maybe even at one point somebody thought to take him first overall. This is not like a caliber guy who, the Flyers really drafted outside the top 5. This is a top 5 caliber player. And I believe Matthew Tkachuk, who is one of his comparables that we're going to talk about, that was taken at 6 overall as well. And really, he just dropped to 6 because he's not a center, and this was a center heavy draft. Overall, this combination of size, skill, and smarts, shooting ability, playmaking ability. The only real flaw that he has is that he is not an explosive skater. And I don't necessarily think that that's a problem. I think people make a little too much about like pure speed, just his ability to get up and down the ice. So far, it has clearly not been a
Yeah.
problem in his career.
And he's going to continue as well to get stronger, so that'll help with his skating. He's a pretty decent skater actually for a guy that's 6'3". It's really what the problem is some of the acceleration, like mechanically, like when he's trying to get to places doesn't look the greatest, but he still does end up getting there and, is able to get to loose pucks and things like that. So really, like when he uses his crossovers, the speed's not an issue. It's just mechanically doesn't look that great. But as you said, right, there's lots of room for development. So as he continues to get stronger and kind of grow into his body even more, because he's really only an 18-year-old kid here, he's gonna, be able to improve that skating ability. But that's like the one knock I would say. But in terms of like a lot of his skill set, right? Strengths would most likely be like stick handling, really good playmaker, hockey IQ is one of them as well.
Yeah, and his ability to work around the net for sure. We don't have a lot of guys who are highly competent around the net. That is a big skill set for him. He's able to make moves in tight, similar to Matvei Michkov, only he's 4 or 5 inches larger than Matvei Michkov, and probably will be inevitably stronger than Michkov. He has a very interesting game because you usually don't see big men with this combination of, playmaking as well. Like James Van Riemsdyk was, I guess, somewhat of a comparable, but Van Riemsdyk was never an elite playmaker. Like Porter Martone is up there with every playmaker that you could consider the best playmaker in this draft. So his ability to just be dangerous in every single situation makes him immensely valuable to the Philadelphia Flyers. And I think when they were looking at this pick, they kind of went like, okay, we like James Higgins, we like Jay O'Brien, or Jake O'Brien. I made that mistake. But they looked at the combination of like, eventually one day we are going to want this guy here. So if we have the ability to take him right now, check this type of player off of our list, and it does kind of resolve some of the big question marks about the Flyers' problem with size up front. Their wingers are not very big. And they don't have anybody with an elite skill set with size outside of, I guess you can kind of say Tyson Forrester, who I do see as a top six forward in the NHL, but nobody who could be a 90-point player in the NHL on a regular basis. This is a player that I think majority of the league will be envious of. And when I do look at his skating, you're absolutely right. Like he does get where he needs to get to, but I notice he pivots very well. Like he doesn't have like that ability to burn players on a regular basis, but he does have a shiftiness at his size that I didn't really see with somebody like James Van Riemsdyk, right? For example, he does seem to be somewhat more dynamic than majority of players. The best comparables I've seen to him is actually not Matthew Tkachuk because he's not as mean or nasty. He is physical, but he's not like an agitator built into a physical frame. It seems to be more like a Mikko Rantanen or like a Blake Wheeler type of power forward, like a guy who can score, play around the net, but also beat guys one on one. He's going to be physical, but he's also not going to, get under the team's skin every 5 seconds. So I think we need to temper our expectations when we throw out the name Matthew Tkachuk. There really aren't really many Matthew Tkachuks or Brady Tkachuks in the league. They're kind of in a class of their own, right? It's like they're a combination of like Tom Wilson and more skill. But I don't really see many downsides with this pick. Like even though we needed a center, and we'll talk about it with the next video we do. He obviously is a huge need. And now the question comes, and this is something I've been thinking about, and I tweeted about this as well, Vasili. I'm not confident in this at all, but I do look at his age, the fact that he's 2 years younger than Jet Luchenko. He's an October birthday, so he's old for his draft year. He is physically developed at 6'3", 207 pounds. He's got the size, right? He's got the maturity. He also played with NHL players in the World Tournaments recently. Not a long stint, but he did have time there. How far away is he from making the NHL? Now, the Flyers would be wise to not rush him, even if they are tempted to. So the most likely scenario is that he gets sent back for 1 year. But I would not be surprised if they are somewhat tempted to keep him at the NHL level if he is NHL ready, even to a degree, because physically he's there, but it might not allow him to work on his game the way he really needs to. What do you think?
Yeah, like the physicality is there at 6 foot 3, 208 pounds. So I think he could definitely keep up with the NHL pace of play and just playing with professionals in terms of like the size and the physicality of the NHL game. We have to remember too, right? He also played at the World Championships in the summer, so that was with NHL players, getting to play with guys and see what the NHL pace is like. Obviously, when you're playing with players of that caliber, you're gonna have to keep up with them. I did want to mention as well, like in the OHL this past season, 37 goals, 61 assists, 98 points. His assist totals went way up from 2023-24 to 2024-25. He went from 38 assists to 61 assists. That kind of highlights the fact that his playmaking ability is really, and his passing is really one of his strong suits, right? Like what he can do is, in terms of his stick handling, he really uses that to open up defenders and like draw defenders in towards him. Coupled with the size, right? So like the stick handling and the size, it can really open up the ice, and then he can kind of take the puck to the net, and use his hockey IQ from there. So like you can see like in certain situations, right? Like he'll use his size to help with his passing abilities. So like he could use his size to draw players towards him, kind of cover the puck away. And then when he gets away from those players, it opens up passing lanes for his teammates. So I would say a lot of his size actually goes hand in hand with his playmaking. And to your point, right? Like, in terms of him becoming an NHL ready player next season, totally maybe on the table. We'll have to see obviously how he can progress and how he develops over the summer and how he progresses at training camp when we see him. But I think the fact that he's already doing those things with his size at lower levels potentially could mean that he'll be trying to do that at training camp and at higher levels as well. Like he seems to be a player that isn't afraid to use his size, and I think that's going to be one of his key aspects at the NHL level in terms of like becoming an impact and effective player. So because he's already doing it at the OHL level now effectively, it'll be interesting to see like how he can kind of take those same skill sets and those traits like in his skill set and use that size to kind of work with his playmaking ability. So.
Yeah, and you brought up his production, the 37 goals, 61 assists, 98 points. It was in 57 games. He didn't play a full, I mean, he played a good amount of games, but because of the World Juniors tournaments, he didn't play a full season. I do wonder if he would have hit that 40 goal, 65 assist pace, surpassed 100 points, giving him somewhere around 110 points or something like that,
Yeah.
which would have been severely impressive. In the playoffs, he also was more than a point a game, 4 goals, 5 assists in 6 games. So the guy, pretty much in all situations, was well above a point per game pace. And I remember, and I don't know if you want to pull up Steve's write up that you sent me earlier, but maybe that's worth
Yeah, I do
reading
have
out
it
loud.
here. Yeah, so in terms of CHL point per game for the 2025 NHL draft class, Martone has a 1.72 points per game, which is only second to Misa with 2.06. So that just shows in terms of the points per game for this class, right? He's right up there with Misa. If anybody listened to our 2021 or 2025, sorry, draft preview show with Steve, he actually had Martone over Misa. So that's something to note. And Steve also mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, that if for some reason, let's say Schaefer was out of the equation and you had Martone or Misa, right, he would say he wouldn't have an issue with Martone even being potentially a first overall in this draft. So I just thought based on, Steve's prowess in terms of just in terms of like the draft and obviously everything that he does with his analysis, real interesting tidbits to mention.
Yeah, and I just keep honestly, man, when I was just looking at his highlights, and I'm gonna dig into Porter Martone a lot more than just watching highlights. I'm gonna try to watch a lot more footage of him just to get a better understanding of him as a player in certain situations and not just, focus on the fancy stuff that we've seen up front. But man, his shot is ridiculous. When that guy releases a wrist shot, like it like through screens, top corner, over
He
the
can pick
shoulder.
corners. He can pick
Yeah.
corners and beat goalies
I
clean.
well, I wonder if he could be a 50 goal scorer in the right situation if he's playing with a guy like, let's just say, Trevor Zegras or Matvey
Well,
Michkov. Is that
yeah.
potential in his future? I don't know.
I will say, I mean, like, there's always the potential to develop into something like that. He's a pretty decent goal scorer at the OHL level. A lot of his goals, though, did come from in close. So I will say, like, he wasn't as much of a peripheral shooter. So in terms of 50 goals, maybe. But I think more of the strong suit's playmaking. But I think it's something that he can obviously get better at and continue to even, maybe push and be like a 35, 40 goal guy. 50
Yeah.
maybe, but not sure like 35, 40 might be more of his range, right?
Yeah, and then you might be 100% right, but that's why I said in the right situation where maybe he is around the net. But, this definitely solves, again, there was a Trevor Zegras acquisition, but now the Porter Martone acquisition. A player like this will help considerably on the power play, a position, maybe he can be that guy that plays around the net for us. We haven't really had anybody elite at that for several years.
Yeah.
The closest thing we've ever had to it in the modern era is Wayne Simmons, a guy who he does favor. And it's actually very interesting to hear that he had a picture of Claude Giroux in his basement. He did idolize Wayne Simmons to some degree, modeled his game off of both of them, which you can see a little bit of both of them in his game, which is very interesting. And if you ask Flyer fans back in the day, if you could combine Wayne Simmons and Claude Giroux into one player, that's like a dream, especially considering when you looked at that team the way it was. So I think it's a home run of a pick. Ideally, yes, we would have preferred a center, but considering how valuable and how talented the player is, the center position could be fixed in other ways and not just through the draft. There are other opportunities. And for right now, the Flyers aren't overpaying for everything. But if you need to overpay and go out there and get yourself a center when time comes, if you have not found a guy quite yet, those opportunities are out there. So I think best player available, like Vasili was saying, was a smart move. And this was a surefire hit, right? So what's the downside, really?
Yeah, he projects to be a first line player. He has projected, to be in that range for essentially a whole year now. So I just think you're the Flyers in that situation. You see him there. He's the best player available. It makes the most sense. One of the biggest things for me when I was just, watching tape on him and looking into his game, like, some of the puck control that he had and like the toe drag release goals, he had a lot of toe drag release goals where he made just defenders look silly, where he would use his size and the puck control, come off toe drag release and just snipe a top corner. And that's a skill set that we haven't really seen a lot on this team, really, right? Like a big power forward that can use his size to draw a defenseman in and snipe goals, and then also use that size to open up lanes and make a lot of strong passes with this playmaking ability. So I think for the Flyers, just that skill set in general, even though it is on the wing, it's something they've been lacking. So it's a really good pick for them, just in the sense that you're not passing up on a guy that projects to be like a first line type of power forward winger. Even if you did need that center position need, right? You can kind of see the mold that Martone is in and what he might potentially become. So I think the Flyers just didn't want to pass up on that opportunity to, take a player with such a not like a talented skill set that's rare, but it's not a player that you see drafted at the top of drafts very often in that power forward mold. So to me, that kind of shows that he's in that upper echelon of skill, right?
Yeah, and the last time the Flyers passed up on that type of player, it was Mikko Rantanen, and taking Ivan Provorov a couple picks ahead of him, and it ended up biting us in the butt to some degree because we've been looking for that type of player ever since. So why not grab him now? Say check that box. He was the best option available at the time. I'm sure people are upset about Hagens still, but at least you walked away with a guy that is potentially better than Hagens, right? So I think it's a win-win, and every problem can be solved. And we talk about it all the time on the podcast. You just need to hit. You need to hit on the picks. They can't miss, and this was a no miss pick in my opinion. So thank you for that one. We're gonna come back with more content. Silly, thank you as well. Be excited for Porter Martone. Welcome to the show.